Have you ever feared whereby you've gone it, where going into it and you just don't know what to talk about?
No, never. I know I will always have enough to talk about, at least for an hour, unless the person is monosyllabic and very boring, in which case I clearly didn't do my research into that guest to know that he is not a good guest. It's all down to me. Did I do the homework before jumping on that call?
UNCOOL is produced by Creators at Work and Story Machine.
Like this show? Then rate it 5 stars and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. UNCOOL is a podcast produced, written, and hosted by Sean Lee Win Chong and co-hosted by Yen Lyng, co-produced by Raven Lim and edited by Ray Ng. UNCOOL. It's cool to be uncool.
So, Sean, we have been doing this series for quite a while now.
In fact, this would actually be like UNCOOL episode 40, something like that. 40.
That's
40.
right.
Talking to cool people about how the time that they were uncool. And as far as our concern, as far as that's concerned, our guest today actually did what sounds pretty cool to me, but at least to our parents, it would sound very uncool, which is to go quit your job and go do podcasting. But anyway, very multi-talented our guest today.
I'm so glad you're trying to put it as multi-talented and not just, it's completely uncool and I regret inviting you on.
Hey, we are doing podcasting as well, so we can't complain over here.
But have you quit your job?
I wish I could, actually. But our guest today, she's Ling Yah. She's a producer of the So This Is My Why podcast. And she also, the job that she left is from the legal profession as well, not just any profession. It is the, sought after or highly viewed Asian profession of law. Earlier this year to work on a podcast. And so this is why we are talking to her today on our How to Talk to People series, where we unpack how to make talking cool again.
Yeah, and of course, it's very fitting as well that we're speaking to her because in this edition of UNCOOL, how to talk to people is really about how do you talk to people to persuade them, right? Especially when you want to initiate new projects, when you want to network, you want to pitch, you want to build communities. And, inevitably it all starts with talking to people, and that's clearly something she has no problem doing. So, Ling Yah, it's great to meet you.
Great to meet you too.
And I really have to get this out of the way, but how did that conversation go when you told your family, I'm going to quit at my jobs and I'm going to do podcasting?
To be honest, my family was really, really understanding. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had spoken about this for so long. It wasn't in so much the terms of, I'm going to quit to do a podcast, but more just, law isn't for me. I've not felt it since the very beginning. I don't know why it is, but it's just not for me. And that was just a consistent narrative for pretty much my entire career, which is almost a decade. So I think I kind of normalized them to the idea of, I think she might be leaving, but I don't know where. And then towards the very end, I spent quite a few years and they noticed I was working really crazy hours. After work, I'll be up 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. It reached such a point where my mom went, can I help you with some of the work that you're doing? Because, you are staying up so late every single day. And I think it was just that consistency, the fact that I could see, you're serious about this. You really do work hard, which I think I proved even as a kid as well. And the fact that from all that funny little fun things were happening to me, and then people who actually wanted to pay me were coming. So then they went, okay, this girl has thought about it the longest time, worked really hard to the point where people actually wanted to pay her for it. Well, this is a different age. We don't understand what is happening, but we trust that she can figure it out. So just go. Every now and then, when my parents would go, so what exactly do you do again?
I've had that question for the last 14 years.
Yeah,
so.
me too, actually.
It's like, so how do I explain to people what you're doing?
Yeah. Speaking about I don't think it's only the consistency, right? I think it's the fact that the topic of your conversation has always been, this is my why. You have been searching for answers. I think way back then, if your parents knew the topic of your podcast, they would have known that, hey, maybe she isn't that happy doing what she's doing. And this is the whole premise of your show, right? And you've done over 100, I think, is it close to 200 episodes right now of your podcast, just trying to find out that that
I
question.
hope so. 130. I'm sure we will hit 200, but right now it's almost 130.
So my question is, after talking to so many people, finding out their why, do you think you have found your why?
So the benefit of asking every single person, do you find your why, is I know all the best answers. So I can go from all of them and say, which answer do I resonate with the most? And I would say the answer I resonate with the most is actually that why is a continuous journey, which is true. And this is one of those instances where when people say the journey matters a lot more than a destination, and it really is true because you just never know what doors will open so long as you just open yourself up to the fact that you've got to put yourself out there and you just got to work really, really hard and things will happen. It's not just a might happen, it will. And along the way, you will find things that make you stay up to 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And if you keep doing that, not just this week or next week, but 2 years later, 3 years later, then that's a very, very big hint. So once I realized that, it wasn't so much a why, but just something that I really love right now. And I started speaking to other people, my guests, like Jacqueline Novogratz, after our interview. And I said, yeah, I found myself just staying up to 2 a.m. all the time. And she looked at me and she said, yeah, that's a hint. I said, you're right. That is the hint.
Isn't it great? Like everyone talks about this, what's it term? Ikigai, right? Where you find
Yes,
what you
Ikigai came out
like,
all the time.
what you like, what
Yeah.
you what people are willing to pay you for.
Yeah, what people want, what you're good at, exactly. So that was the answer most of the time when I ask guests. They'll say either very, very rarely would they say, I have found my why. It's more common for them to say, my why is changing all the time, but it's most common for them to say, I believe in saying Ikigai.
That's right. So, but yeah, why did you choose podcast and not say any other platform as well when you were first starting out?
I had tried other platforms, but for some reason, it wasn't a question in my head to not start a podcast. It was because when I was on my journey to figuring out what I want to do, i.e., let's start something, building it in public, then I very quickly learned about this world of blogging, of SEO. Obviously, you need to learn. And I realized that when you Google, how do you SEO, they're just generic answers all the time. I go to page 5, page 10, the same thing over and over again. But along the way, I started seeing results linking to podcasts. So I started listening to them and I realized that, oh, the episodes, 40 minutes only, but I learned so much more in this 40 minutes than I ever did in any of these other websites. So obviously, I followed them. I found other episodes as well. I learned more and more and I realized that, wow, this is a real treasure trove of actual, real, actionable, practical knowledge that I can't find anywhere else. And obviously, these people are also startup founders, entrepreneurs, and they will obviously say, you should always start a podcast and therefore you can buy my course. And I guess somewhere along the way, I just went from podcast is really great to I'm going to start one.
It's like that
because it helps me so much. So yeah, why not?
Right. It's like after you've just consumed something for so long, it just maybe I can do that myself as well.
Yeah, it's like if you can do it, I'm sure I can do it. Why not?
Because I feel like, especially when it comes to like podcasts, it looks like, especially now, everybody can be a podcaster nowadays, right? Clearly, you've made more than 130 episodes.
Yeah, with 27,000 followers, 67,000 downloads. Yeah.
But at the very start, right, how did you do it and get, actually get people to talk to you? Because, we started from zero, right? And we are like this. I mean, I guess you're coming from Malaysia and you're approaching all these people over the world and you're thinking like, well, why should I even care and talk to you? So how do you even get that conversation going with them?
I just ask. Yeah, it's really, really very simple. Before I even launched, before I even had any name, any website, I pitched to several people. I got 15 yeses just on that very raw, I'm thinking of starting a podcast around this topic. Would you agree to talk to me? And mind you, out of the 15 that said yes, I only sort of knew 2. The rest were complete cold pitches.
Okay.
So for me, right from the get-go, was the realization, which was obviously proven as well, that you just got to ask and you just never know who are going to say yes. And the others, honestly, very rarely do people say no. They just probably wouldn't reply to you, which honestly doesn't matter at all. So for me, yeah, I could count with basically 2 hands number of outright no, don't come back to me ever again, which honestly is nothing, to be honest. You just forget there's so many other interesting people to feature. So for me, Yeah, there is no secret. You just gotta ask, and most people are too afraid to ask, or they already think that people are gonna say no, so they don't ask. In which case, I slip in and I get the yes.
And over the journey, I think you realize that a lot of people are very willing to talk about themselves a little bit more.
Yes, there are certain people for sure. Like one of the earliest guests I had, he was Finian Tan, VC, very, very successful in deep tech. And he basically actually asked me, we had a pre-interview, one of my very first ones, and he asked me, how many downloads do you have? And at the time I had like less than 200, I would say. And I went, 200, 250. And episode I kind of jacked it up very generously. And then he kind of looked at me and went, okay, let's do it tomorrow. And the next day during the interview, we started at 10 p.m. and we went on for 3 hours. Really, really, really long. He was so generous because he has so many interesting things to talk about. And at the end, he kind of told me that I asked this number because I just wanted to know how you were doing. And if it was doing very, very well, like over 10,000, I would have given you just 1 hour of my time. But because you were still very, very young, I decided to give you as much time as you want because I'm a VC and I'm always looking to help people. And so that has always stayed with me. The fact that some of these people, highly successful, actually are actively looking to give back.
That is amazing. That in and of itself is an amazing story, right?
Yeah. And you would never know who these people are, right? So you just got to ask, and I might find another Finian. So I always put it at the back of my head. Might be another Finian who just really wants to help you, but you just never
And I
asked.
heard that this is also how people find mentors, right? And even people who, in our line of work, we will also find a lot of people in the industry who are very experienced in what they do, and at a certain point, they are just waiting to pass their knowledge on to people, but they don't have a vehicle to do that. They don't have an outlet and avenue to do that. So giving them the platform, actually they feel like, oh, okay, actually that's what they've been looking for quite some time. Not to say that we have we're doing them a favor as such. They're doing like you, right? You are doing us more of a favor than anything else.
No, I
But
don't think so.
Yeah, it's just amazing at how people are so willing to help and so willing to give you a leg up.
Because they probably had a lot of other people who helped them in the first place. So the answer I always get is, I just want to give back, pay it forward because someone helped me first.
And right now you've grown 27,000 followers, more than 67 downloads, no longer 250.
Thank goodness.
And then, well, you have a book deal. It's just wow. And you got new episodes every week without fail. When was the moment over the course of these 130 episodes or something that you're doing that you looked at it and it's really started to realize that, okay, the door's opening for me, and yes, I'm not struggling anymore. I can really do this like for real?
I would say when I started this, and I love research, I always do my research. I knew when I launched this that it tends to take an average of 3 years for anything to really take off. So for me, I gave myself that 3-year runway. First year, nothing. Second year, it's all right, nothing. Third year, maybe, hopefully, something's going to start to happen. I would say things really took a turn when I took LinkedIn really seriously. And in my second week, one post went viral, and I thought, of course, when you go viral, you want to double down, right? You want to figure out, how can I do it again and again and again? And I just checked my analytics. I have hit 5.4 million impressions in 11 months. And for me, it's one thing, and I'm sure you must know as well, for you to get that many impressions on one platform, but to bring that and convert them into podcast listeners, into newsletters, into clients, that's a completely different story. Of all the platforms out there, LinkedIn's the one that's worked for me really, really well. And so because of that, so huge traction every time one post went viral. And I realized that this is a thing. And it reached a point where I realized I was saying no to lots of opportunities because I just didn't have the time. I have a full-time job. I'm sure you also know because you do a podcast. When I first started, it took me a whole week just to produce one episode. Now I need to balance that with going back to the office again, plus also doing extra client work, plus building business. It's impossible. So I realized that there was an opportunity there. There were people who were saying, come back to me if you're going full-time. Then we'll talk because I want you dedicated to this. And I thought, well, you never know, because I just couldn't imagine myself doing the same thing again, i.e. legal job, which I knew I didn't want to for another year because really it was going to be me staying
that's
out of
right.
fear as opposed to anything else. So fear as in, I know, for instance, if I stay on this company, I know I'm going to earn. Every month, the money's going to come in. I'm a lawyer. I'll just rack up another year. It's very certain, very clear. Once you leave, you don't have that certainty. Are you going to earn anything this month or next month? Will anyone care? Would my numbers drop? I'm sure you notice as well every single week. Your numbers are changing all the time. And it's scary to realize that now every single day you're posting something, you're basically starting from ground zero. And you're praying, you're
It is
hoping
a
that people
scary
still
jump,
care.
you know. I think even that time, you're basically like one of us right now. You're the freelancer and your own boss. That I think coming from a very stable job, especially such a well looked upon career such as yours, to suddenly coming to one that's a little bit, in some people's minds, might be a bit rogue. I can relate with that fear. Yeah, I think you have it more. You have it worse than I did, or Sean did, because I think we did it when we were quite young when we started this career path.
But that's even more impressive, to be honest, that you did it so much younger. I mean, I wouldn't have the guts.
It's true. It's true because in that decision when I made to the point by, do I really want to be freelance or not, right? And I was thinking at that point in time, it's like, okay, right now if I'm earning like about X dollars, and it's not that difficult to earn X dollars as a freelancer, so why the hell not? But I think as it goes up and the number gets higher and higher, it starts to get more resistance. And because it's got the risk reward starts to really really be very different from right at the start when I was earning X amount, right, which I thought was achievable. So yeah, I think that's really really great that that it happens at such a late stage. It must have been really really hard.
But you have made the
Yeah,
change. So
I don't know.
congratulations.
But on the note on the note of fear, have you ever feared when you've gone into any of the, at least I mean, you've recorded 130 episodes, right? So have you ever feared whereby you've going into it and you just don't know what to talk about?
No, never. Because I never go into a conversation without prepping. So I know I will always have enough to talk about. And it's actually not that hard, even if you don't prep, to have a conversation with someone, at least for an hour, unless the person is monosyllabic and very boring, in which case I clearly didn't do my research into that guest to know that he is not a good guest. So really, at the end of the day, it's all down to me. Did I do the homework before jumping on that call?
Yeah, I guess the point is like I think as Asians, or especially for us in Singapore or in Malaysia and so on, we just find that starting to talk to people and then carrying on, that it's just started to become very uncool, because you find that it's a lot easier for me to like I'm just going to send you a text instead, and I rather do that any day over like having actually sitting down and having a conversation for 3 hours with you.
Well, to be fair, the conversation on my podcast as opposed to a conversation if I meet up for a coffee is very, very different, because with the podcast, it's extremely structured. I already have a very clear narrative for you. I actually already know 70% what you're going to say. I'm just asking those questions because I want those specific stories, while also asking the questions in between that I know you have never been asked before because I've listened to every interview I've ever done. So for me, very structured, very, very focused, because I basically put myself in the shoes of a listener and go, what kind of podcast do I hate? And I hate the ones where people come in and say, I'm just gonna chill, I'm just gonna chat about whatever comes to my mind. And I actually didn't even bother to look you up. Sorry, where do you come from and what kind of podcast do you even run? Like those kind of things I know I never enjoy. So I just make an effort to be the exact opposite.
So you mentioned how talking to someone on the podcast is very structured and it's very different from having an actual face-to-face conversation with someone, or even maybe someone at work. So how do you handle these conversations, more or less? Do you go in with a different mindset? Do you go in? Do you find one easier than the other? Maybe. What goes through your mind when you're thinking like, how am I going to talk to this person?
I wouldn't say it's easier, because easier, it really depends on who your counterpart is. So it's easier in a sense for an interview because I already have all the questions. Regardless, I will always go in with at least 30. There is no way it would take me less than 1 hour to go through all of them for sure. And there's the more interviews you do, And the more, for instance, you're always talking about VCs, you're talking about startups all the time. There are always this set number of questions that you can ask them. If they're raising funds, whole series around that. If they are just starting out, obviously you have to talk about growth. Who are your people? How do you even start? Weren't your parents scared? Where do you get your funding? Like all those typical questions, typical themes that you have to cover anyway. So very, very easy. When it's in person, I tend to not go in having prepped. I mean, sometimes if it's someone I've met online who say, oh, let's meet up, I'll probably do a quick scroll to see who you are. But I'm not going to sit down and do 40 hours of analysis on who you are. So in that sense, there's only so much that you can ask and talk about if you haven't done that 40-hour research. And it's not meant to be anyway, because it would be kind of freaky for me to go and meet you in person for coffee and then go, I know that you grew up in Pittsburgh and you used to eat laksa every single morning, and you go, what the heck?
That's a bit weird.
It's a bit weird, but it's not so weird on a podcast because people then would then go, oh, I'm really impressed. How did you find out about it?
So the premise of how you approach a person would also be different, right? Did you ever find yourself not being able to code switch fast enough, or like, you know, you've been doing so many podcasts that in person you just forget, and then it becomes an interview more or less when you're talking to someone?
Well, I mean, not really, because there's always a structure again for the podcast. And also, before I interview the person, I'm listening to them a lot, especially if they've done podcasts. And if you ever listen to someone, I'm sure you have as well, you get a sense of who they are. And once you have that, then once you jump on a call, it might be your first time meeting virtually, but it feels like you already met them. You already have a sense of who they are, how they respond, their personality, etc. So I always go in having just heard their voice fresh off some other platform. And so it doesn't feel weird. I'm already ready and in that right mind frame.
So it sounds like before you even go into all these conversations, you have quite a lot of foreplay already, in that sense. And I think that generally, you know, as we always say, better foreplay anyway leads to better things, right? So,
Hope so.
so with all these things you've experienced, right? And what have you learned then that you would like to, that you think that, you know, someone who is thinking about starting their own podcast should know, of course, besides all this research that you talked about?
Just know that you have to be really clear on why you are doing it. Don't do it just because it's cool, everyone's doing it. Yeah, you can do that, but why? Because it is so much more work that you can imagine. Of course, you can always just pick up your phone, just put a voice note and just upload it. But do you really want to be that? Because it really reflects who you are, the kind of level standards that you hold yourself to. And it shocks me even to this day that people really look at the quality of STIMY as an extension of the quality of who I am and the work that I can produce in pretty much any other field. I.e., if you can put so much work to such as high standards, you can ask such insightful, quote unquote, questions, that means surely you have the intelligence, the discipline, the drive to do whatever else I would like to work with you on. So it really is a portfolio, an indicator of who you are. So just be careful of that. The fact that, yeah, you can be very casual. People might think certain things about you. It's a lot more work than you might think. And also, traction isn't something that you would find online. I mean, immediately, I'm sure you've noticed as well. We plateau all the time. It's the hardest platform in the world to ever gain any listeners or followers. It's the worst in the world. You should have some other platform, some other business, and this is supposed to supplement, not the other way around.
Well, you've spoken to a lot of types of people, right? You've spoken to VCs, you've spoken to high-level lawyers, ex-politicians, current politicians, very successful businessmen, businesswomen. But do you have a level or type of profile that you go for nowadays when you are thinking of the next guest to be on your podcast?
So I always have to think of who my audience is. My audience is very international, a lot from Southeast Asia for sure, but also US, UK. So if I'm bringing someone from the US, UK, for instance, they can be really, really great, really, really famous. But if they have just a US presence and it's highly localized, then I'll have to think, well, but do people in Southeast Asia care? If they don't care, then it's very hard for me to bring on. Unless there's something about you that would really inspire other people in this part of the world. For instance, yes, it's very highly localized US content, but hey, I gained 2 million followers on TikTok in 6 months. And that's something that anyone would be interested in, regardless. Or maybe I'm as an Asian American and my parents just immigrated 30 years ago, and I still go back to Malaysia for, once every 2, 3 years. That is a link that will help to bring everyone together. So that's one thing, is you need to have something that's interesting, a hook to bring people in firstly. You also, and we spoke about this briefly, you need to be able to be a good communicator. If you drone and you sound very boring, you give monosyllabic answers. I mean, it's a podcast. If you don't have that voice, I'm so sorry, you just don't cut it. It is true, because ultimately the question is, will listeners want to listen and be present? Because if you're so boring, they turn off at 5 minutes. What is the point?
That's true. Now you have that presence to sort of pick and choose, right? But back then, when you were just starting out, did you do that as well? Or was it just anyone who said, yes, we'll just come on my podcast? I asked because this is something
No,
that we
definitely not.
Like I think for every 100 people we approach, like 99 will just ghost us. That's pretty normal. I mean, we've got a thick skin, so we keep going on. But you see, you have a high success rate, so you clearly have got something worked out there.
Well, I do my research before I reach out to these people. In all my pitches, I would tell them why I want to speak to them, and those points would show that I've already done the research. So even before I've spoken to you, I am serious about it. It's not a generic email. I've already put in the work. So a lot of people will recognize it and go, wow, you didn't even know if I will ever reply or see this email, and you already did the work. If you're going to do it at this point, you probably do it a lot more when we have to actually interview. And a lot of these people have been interviewed a lot, so they know what a zero effort interview looks like and one with effort. And of course, they will always choose the latter. So I think that is probably one that really allows people to say yes. So to be fair, the podcast is actually somehow surprising a small part of what I'm doing now. So we mentioned LinkedIn briefly, and that's basically what I am now doing. I'm just doing LinkedIn personal branding. And that does take a lot of time. And some people do find it very surprising. Go, how do you go from lawyer to podcaster to LinkedIn personal branding? And then I realized that actually everything has been purely organic, because with the podcast, it's really deep diving into very interesting people. I read everything I can about everything around you and what you have put out before I speak to you. Whereas this is me going even deeper. I work with you to learn everything around you and within you, because you're telling me your thoughts, your feelings, what you care about. And then I write and execute on your behalf as though I am you. So it's bringing it to the next level. That's kind of storytelling that I actually really enjoy, because that was the thing that I found frustrating in law. It felt like I was always on the periphery. You come in because you want something drafted into the form of a contract, and I never see it again. And I always work with the same people in the same industry, whereas here it's very, very different people. At one moment, I'm talking about ESG. Another, I'm talking about what it's like being a Silicon Valley startup founder. And it's just such a wide variety. But to do my job well, I have to know what you do and who you are, as well as you, if not better. And it's just really exciting for me to know that every single day I get to learn from experts while being paid and seeing their business grow. So that's my current focus.
I just hear you describing, what you do now and what's coming up for you, Ling. I just feel like you're really happy. And with that, I also feel like very happy for you when I hear you saying that. Because
thank you.
I think at least, how you say that your why changes, but I think for now, you have found it, So it's just very inspiring to hear someone who has found his or her why and is making it happen.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. I feel so shy now.
Because you can tell when someone...
See lots of doubt swirling.
I mean, we've spoken to a lot of people as well, right? And a lot of people we talk to are in the context of work. We're doing it because we have to. We're doing it. They're doing it on behalf of their company. They're doing it because they need money. And so there's a real difference when you find someone who is doing it because they're passionate about it and they're able to, it just excites them when they're talking about it. So there is that little spark that's happening when you speak about it. So I love it when that happens, because it's quite sad, but nowadays it doesn't happen that often anymore.
I know, because I was that person for the longest time. And then I would speak to other people and they would say, you really liked up when you talk about the podcast. And they said it so many times that I thought, well, Ling, you better take the hint.
Good for you, Ling. Yeah, you have.
Yeah, I'm looking at you now and I'm just wondering what you like before. Like if we went back and we asked your former boss or your teachers in secondary school and they said, hey, can you describe what Ling Yah was like? What would they actually say?
I was very different when I was younger. I was very, very quiet, not because I was shy. I just had my own things to do. When I was young, I just wanted to read books, I just wanted to write. And so for me, it was any time spent talking to other people is time spent taken away from my books. And I don't want that. So just leave me alone. So I was very much that. I also had my music that was going on. And that was very all consuming. We always had performances, orchestra, solo performances that consumed my life. So very, very busy, I would say, but never the actively putting myself out there, talking to people, going, for instance, hey, I'm going to Singapore. Would you like to meet up? Like never, ever, ever did I ever do that or think that I could do it and have anyone even say yes to me. But now I am doing that and I cannot imagine a different life. I really enjoy it.
So it's like, oh, set you up for this, right? Because it seems to have set you up for this because you're always very much into reading, into research, I guess, finding out things, researching, I guess, all is part of it. And then somehow I want to talk to people, it's like just came out and got quite a nice balance. So
yeah. And I realized that as well, especially when I was working, that people always talk about, oh, I don't want to be in my own bubble. Oh, I wish I could meet new people. And I realized that, yeah, I'm also complaining as well, but I'm just complaining. I'm not doing anything about it. Whereas with this podcast, since it's weekly, I can actually go and say, and I almost never interview anyone I know. I can almost always go, every single week, I meet at least one new person. And when you think about it, it's really just 48 new people, which is not that many, but it's still so much more than if I didn't have this little internal KPI to hit, meet new people. Now I can honestly say I have expanded my network, very different people, and not only are they different and new, but they are the best of the best.
So have you ever struggled to meet this KPI? Like, has there ever been a week where you go like, oh my goodness, I don't think I can meet someone new or get an episode out this week?
Last week. Yes, you caught me. I have been thinking about this whole week going, oh my gosh, should I release on Tuesday, Wednesday? Oh no, it's already Thursday. I might as well wait till this Sunday. Yeah, you caught me. Last week.
and does it get to a point where like, okay, yeah, anything will do lah? Yeah,
no. I mean, I actually do have lots of episodes in the pipeline. It's just the whole, oh my gosh, I have to sit down, I have to do all the editing, put it all together, do the copy, have to release or do all the marketing materials. And I just go, no, but I have all these other deadlines for actual paying clients that I need to prep for. So then it just gets shoved to the side. Yeah.
Well, sometimes no matter how passionate you are about something, a little bit of rest is needed, and it wears down on you sometimes.
Yeah, that's what people tell me as well. Even at the very start, my friends would say, just give yourself grace. Don't kill yourself over it. And no one's going to notice. At first I thought, oh my gosh, no one will notice I didn't put anything out.
Isn't it worth?
But then, yeah, that's also true. Yes,
that is true.
No one notices. No one cares. But at the same time, what's amazing about podcast listeners is they always go through the archives. And so at least I can say, well, yeah, nothing came out this week, but you have over almost 130 other episodes to look through, which would take more than enough of your time this week and next.
That's right. You were mentioning how you used to be, I don't want to use the word introvert, but I think you were very absorbed in what you love.
I was an introvert though.
But now, it's very different now, it seems like, even though you do have a KPI and you're doing it because of the show, but you are actively reaching out. And I know that a lot of introverts don't like doing this, and this is the reason why they don't do it in the first place. So when or how did that change for you? Because especially for our audience, right?
Great question.
Yeah, a lot of them are creatives and they face this. They are those kinds of people who, I want to sit at home. I just want to do my craft. I don't want to talk to people, even though they're my clients. I don't really want to talk to them. I just want to do what I love. So how did that change?
So I've done the MBTI test before. And I remember growing up, I was 70% I, very clearly remember. The change really came about in my last workplace because I was in large MNC. Suddenly, I wasn't just a lawyer. I was also attending all these different social enterprise meetings as well. I was having to organize lots of different talks, lots of conferences. It wasn't a question of, could you do it, Ling Yah? It's just, you're doing it. Just go and figure it out. So obviously, you are the face. You have to reach out to people. You have to organize, pull everything together, book everything. And I found as I was doing it that firstly, it came very naturally to me. It wasn't hard. It was actually fun. And people seemed to really enjoy it. I went all out. I don't know if you've ever heard of this Korean variety show called Running Man. So,
Oh yeah.
Running Man. So my second year, I was asked to organize a retreat and I went, these are very young, 20-something-year-olds, first job ever, lots of energy. We're going to a very premier island. I'm going to create a real life Running Man competition for you this whole day and end in this epic estate where I've transformed everything. I had this invisible ink. I took over a room filled with balloons, filled with hints, everything. I went all out, even bought like snakes and
Oh my
cockroaches.
god, that is really.
It's a whole other story. I went all out. And I really enjoy it. So I have to say, at that point in time, I thought I had a real crisis of thinking, wait, so is my future me being an event organizer? Is that my why, my future? But it was because of that as well that I realized that firstly, it's really fun to put yourself out there. People are really, really fun. Lots of different and interesting things. So why am I not doing more of it? So I started leaning more into that. Then obviously I did a podcast. Then I spoke to people and I realized, oh, the best people in the world are really not that hard to meet. And sometimes you meet someone where it's just so easy to click with them. And then you get to meet in person. And then you become friends. Then you become really good friends. Then their friends become your friends become theirs. And suddenly your whole world explodes. And it was just these little things that grew and grew to the point where I did my MBTI test again. And I knew as I was answering that it was going to be different because all my answers that used to be on the left, I knew were on the right. Distinctly questions I remember answering, I knew was 180-degree difference. So when the results came out and it said I was now 70% E, I thought, that's correct. That is exactly who I am now. So I don't know, am I a selective extrovert or
You were
I do still enjoy being alone all the time. Closer extrovert. Yeah, when the occasion arises. And there was a point where I was meeting so many people where I would be out all day, 10 p.m., 11 p.m., and I would still feel so energized. And I'll see everyone flagging and I'll go, why are you flagging? I feel so energetic. Let's go on. So it's a very different thing, I would say. But it also has to do with the fact that you find the right people. Some people, if you just don't click, if the vibe is just not right, then you're going to feel depressed and you're just going to want to escape. But you find that right mood, the right group of people by putting yourself out there often enough, of course, then it would just all come together.
The question we have always asked as well for this season is, how do you talk to people?
How do I talk to people? Just treat them as human. Just be interesting in what they have to say. Don't talk about yourself all the time. I like to listen to other people and just ask more questions. If they say something and they use a particular word that I find unusual, I'll go, so you said that, but why? Just ask why. And people will probably share with you.
And so to wrap this all up, Ling Yah, we ask all our guests these questions. When were you, Ling Yah, the most uncool? And what do you think you would say to yourself then?
I was most uncool when I suppose I was in London and I just did law. And I would say to myself that honestly, that was such a great opportunity. And just because you were doing law didn't mean that your world, your future had to be law. There are so many other things that you can do to explore. And it all starts with just going out and meeting people and doing different things. It doesn't have to be big kind of commitments, 3-6 months. It could be just, I just want to go to one event this week. And if you do it often enough, it becomes a habit, then little moments will really resonate with you and you go, oh, I'm really glad I did it. I'm really glad I met this person. Let's meet up again. And slowly over time, you see that there's a little change that happens. And that's what really matters the most. You take the small changes and then 1 year later, look back and you realize you're in a very different place. 5 years later, 10 years later, even bigger change. You would have never dreamt it. It would have been really scary if you envision where you would be in 10 years. But in the moment, if you took that one step, very doable, but it makes all the difference in the world.
You know, Ling Yah, I know I said that we're going to wrap this up, right? But I just want to say that I think that is very beautiful, especially the journey that you shared about you going from introvert to the extrovert. And that's even after you did the test, right? Because I feel that at least a lot of people that I meet, and maybe that's happening to us right now, right? Where we put ourselves in boxes and feel like this is how it's meant to be, or this is what I'm comfortable with, and that's why it's never going to change, and my life is never going to change. But sometimes it's just about trying something out, and like what you said, you never know where it's going to bring you next. And you're living proof of that. That you thought you were introvert, all tests told you that you were introvert, but then you just actually had to do it, you were forced to do it, you tried it out, and you realize, no, actually I'm the exact opposite of what I've been told I've been doing all my life. And that has led you down so many paths that as great as a law career is, it would not have brought you to the same places. So I just feel that's
For sure. So sometimes it's good to be forced to do things you didn't think you would like.
Exactly. So Ling Yah, if our listeners were interested to follow you on your socials and on your podcast, what are your handles and how do they find you?
The podcast is on every platform you can imagine: Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Just look for So This Is My Why. Handle on Instagram is So This Is My Why. LinkedIn is where I'm most active on, so just look for my name, LingyaH. But otherwise, TikTok, YouTube as well. Just put in So This Is My Why podcast. You will find it.
Like this show? Then rate it 5 stars and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. UNCOOL is a podcast produced, written, and hosted by Sean Lee Win Chong and co-hosted by Yen Lyng, co-produced by Raven Lim, and edited by Ray Ng. UNCOOL. It's cool to be uncool.
On the next episode of UNCOOL,
we did this thing called the living room theatre concept. So that was in 1981. We decided to just, start Act 3. We went to homes to do birthday parties.
I actually do remember that I think I was like 7 and Chandra came to my house because I had a birthday party, and you have these guys in like mask and all that, like in the living room, like up close your face, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, the real life.
That can be quite scary. UNCOOL. New episodes every Saturday.